I never thought my own son would try to drug me and steal my $300,000 company at his birthday party. But that night taught me that blood doesn't always mean loyalty. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. Sitting in my office that October afternoon in Springfield, Missouri, I should have trusted my instincts. The manila folder spread across my mahogany desk told a story I'd been trying to ignore for years: the systematic financial failures of my 42-year-old son, Michael. Each document represented another broken promise, another sure-thing investment that had crumbled to dust. The Miami real estate venture, $80,000 lost when the developer vanished with investors' money before breaking ground. I still remembered Michael's enthusiasm as he showed me the glossy brochures featuring pristine condominiums overlooking Biscayne Bay. "Dad, this is it," he'd said, eyes bright with conviction. "This is our ticket to real wealth." 3 months later, the FBI was investigating the company for fraud. The cryptocurrency mining operation, $55,000, evaporated when the equipment Michael ordered turned out to be nothing more than elaborate online advertisements. He'd spent hours explaining blockchain technology to me, insisting that traditional business minds like mine couldn't grasp the future of finance. The future, apparently, belonged to scammers who preyed on dreamers. The food truck business, $35,000, invested in a partnership with a man whose criminal background check revealed embezzlement convictions. When I'd raised concerns, Michael had dismissed my paranoia and accused me of sabotaging his entrepreneurial spirit. The partner disappeared with the equipment and remaining funds within 3 months. 40 years I'd spent building Thompson Construction from nothing. 40 years of dawn-to-dusk workdays, calloused hands, and sacrifice. My late wife Margaret used to joke that I loved concrete and steel more than I loved her, but she understood. We were building something lasting, something to pass down to our son, something that would provide security for generations. The phone's shrill ring interrupted my brooding. Michael's name appeared on the caller ID, and I hesitated before answering. Our conversations lately had followed a predictable pattern: small talk, family updates, then the inevitable request for another investment opportunity. "Dad, perfect timing!" Michael's voice carried an unusual brightness, almost manic in its enthusiasm. "I was just thinking about you." "Were you now?" I leaned back in my leather chair, the same one I'd bought 20 years ago when the company first turned a real profit. "Listen, I know things have been complicated between us lately, but tomorrow's my birthday, and Meredith's planned something special. Just family. You, me, Sarah, Emma. Nothing fancy, just dinner at 6. Something in his tone set me on edge. Michael had never been one for intimate family gatherings. His idea of celebration usually involved expensive restaurants and showing off to acquaintances who barely knew him. "That's thoughtful of you," I said carefully. "Sarah's been cooking all day. She made that pot roast you love, and Emma specifically asked if Grandpa would be there. She's got stories from college she wants to share." The mention of my granddaughter tugged at something in my chest. Emma was 19, a sophomore studying psychology, and the only member of Michael's family who still looked at me with genuine affection rather than calculating assessment. "Of course I'll be there. Wouldn't miss it." "Great. Oh, and Dad, bring your appetite. Sarah's really gone all out this year." Michael's laugh seemed forced, too bright. "See you at 6 sharp." After I hung up, I sat in the gathering dusk of my office, surrounded by the evidence of my son's failures. Outside, Springfield's October evening painted the sky in shades of amber and gold. Mrs. Henderson next door was watering her chrysanthemums, the same routine she'd followed for the 15 years I'd known her. Everything seemed normal, peaceful even. But something cold had settled in my stomach during that phone call. Michael's enthusiasm felt rehearsed, like a salesman's pitch. And Sarah, going all out for a simple family dinner, struck me as odd, especially given their recent complaints about money troubles. I gathered the folders and locked them in my filing cabinet. Tomorrow was Michael's birthday, and despite everything, he was still my son. Maybe this dinner would be different. Maybe we could finally have an honest conversation about his future, about responsibility, about the legacy I'd spent 4 decades building. If I had known what was waiting for me at that birthday party, I would have stayed home and saved myself from learning just how far my own flesh and blood was willing to go for money. The moment I stepped through Michael's front door, I knew something was wrong. The house had been transformed into something that belonged in a magazine spread, not a simple family birthday dinner. Crystal chandeliers I'd never seen before cast warm light over the dining room. The table was set with fine china that must have cost more than most people's monthly salary. Professional floral arrangements adorned every surface, and the aroma wafting from the kitchen suggested catered food rather than Sarah's home cooking. This wasn't a family gathering. This was a production. "Dad, you made it!" Michael appeared at my elbow, practically bouncing with nervous energy. He wore a new suit that probably cost more than the average worker made in a week. For someone who'd been pleading poverty just days ago, he certainly seemed to have found money somewhere. "This is quite a setup," I said, accepting his embrace while my eyes cataloged the expensive details. "Must have cost a fortune." "Sarah wanted to make it special," he replied quickly, steering me toward the living room. 42 is a big milestone, you know." Sarah emerged from the kitchen wearing a dress I recognized from the window of Springfield's most exclusive boutique. Her smile was perfectly practiced, the kind she wore when dealing with difficult bank customers. "Richard, so wonderful you could make it." She kissed my cheek, her perfume expansive and cloying. "I hope you brought your appetite. We have quite a feast prepared." Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, and my heart clenched at the sight of her. My granddaughter looked pale, her usual bright demeanor replaced by something that looked almost like fear. She descended slowly, avoiding eye contact with everyone. "Hi, Grandpa," she said quietly, her hug brief and tense. "How's college treating you, sweetheart?" Before she could answer, Michael was pressing a glass of champagne into my hand. "Dom Perignon," he announced proudly. "Only the best for family, right, Dad?" I recognized the label, a $300 bottle that Michael definitely couldn't afford on his sporadic sales income. The math didn't add up. The decorations, the catering, the champagne, Sarah's dress, Michael's suit, I estimated at least $15,000 in expenses for a man who'd been begging me for investment money just last week. "This is very generous," I said, taking a small sip. The champagne was excellent, but something about the situation made it taste bitter. "Drink up, Dad. It's a celebration." Michael refilled my glass before I'd even finished the first one. "Sarah, didn't you want to show Dad the new art we bought?" For the next hour, they shepherded me through the house like tour guides, constantly refilling my glass, asking how I felt, if I needed to sit down, if I was enjoying myself. Sarah checked on me every 15 minutes with the solicitous attention of a nurse monitoring a patient. "You look a little tired, Richard." "Are you feeling all right? The drive wasn't too taxing, was it? You know, at your age. Maybe you should slow down on the champagne. Actually, no, it's a party. Drink up." Their behavior was so transparently orchestrated that I began to feel like an actor who hadn't been given his script. Emma watched it all with growing distress, occasionally trying to intercept my glass or suggest I might want some food, only to be smoothly redirected by her parents. "Emma, honey, why don't you help me in the kitchen?" Sarah would say, or Michael would engage his daughter in conversation that pulled her away from me. By the third glass, I noticed my head felt heavier than it should have. The room seemed slightly out of focus, and my thoughts moved like honey through my mind. I'd had champagne before, plenty of it, but this felt different, wrong. As Michael guided me toward the staircase, his hand firmly gripping my elbow, Emma suddenly appeared at my side. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with something that looked like panic. "Grandpa, wait," she said, her voice tight with urgency. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my sleeve. "We need to leave, right now." The room seemed to tilt slightly as I looked down at her. Through the fog clouding my thoughts, I could see genuine fear in my granddaughter's eyes. The same eyes that had always looked at me with pure love and trust since she was a little girl. "Emma, what are you talking about?" Michael's voice carried a sharp edge I'd never heard before. "Grandpa just wants to see the renovations upstairs." "No," Emma said firmly, stepping between us. "Grandpa, please, trust me, we have to go now." "Sweetheart, you're being dramatic." Sarah appeared beside us, her practiced smile faltering. "Your grandfather is having a wonderful time, aren't you, Richard?" But Emma's grip on my arm tightened, and she looked directly into my eyes with an intensity that cut through the champagne haze.
"Grandpa, if you've ever trusted me about anything, trust me about this, please." Something in her desperation reached me. This was the granddaughter who'd never lied to me, who'd come to me when her parents' marriage was rocky, who'd asked for my advice about everything from college choices to boy troubles. If Emma was afraid, there was a reason. I think I should listen to Emma," I said slowly, my words feeling thick in my mouth. Michael's face flushed red. "Dad, don't be ridiculous. Emma's just being—" "We're leaving," Emma said, wrapping her arm around my waist and guiding me toward the door. "Now." "Emma!" Sarah's voice was sharp with panic. "You can't just—" But my granddaughter was surprisingly strong for her size, and she managed to get me to the front door despite her parents' protests. The cool October air hit my face like a slap, clearing some of the fog from my brain. "Emma, what's going on?" Michael followed us outside, his birthday celebration forgotten. "You're ruining everything." "Call us a taxi," Emma said to me, ignoring her father. "Please, Grandpa, just call a taxi." My fingers fumbled with my phone, but I managed to request a ride. Emma stood beside me, trembling but resolute, while Michael and Sarah hovered nearby, their faces masks of barely controlled panic. When the taxi arrived, Emma helped me into the back seat and climbed in beside me. As we pulled away from the house, I saw Michael and Sarah standing in their driveway, their expensive party clothes and decorations a stark contrast to their defeated postures. "Springfield General Hospital," Emma told the driver, then looked at me with tears streaming down her face. "Are you okay, Grandpa? How do you feel?" "Confused," I admitted. "Emma, what just happened back there?" She took a shaky breath, then the words poured out of her like water from a broken dam. "They drugged you, Grandpa. They put something in your champagne. I saw Mom crushing up pills and stirring them into the bottle before you got there." The world seemed to stop. "What?" "They had papers upstairs, legal documents. They were going to get you drunk and confused, then make you sign over Thompson Construction to Dad." Emma's voice broke. "I heard them planning it yesterday. Dad said, Dad's getting old. He won't even remember signing this tomorrow." The words hit me like physical blows. My own son had planned to drug me and steal my life's work. "There's more," Emma whispered. "This wasn't their first plan. He's been planning this for months. He said you were too stubborn to just give him the money, so he had to take it." I stared out the taxi window at the familiar streets of Springfield, the town where I'd built my reputation, my business, my life. Everything looked the same, but nothing would ever be the same again. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. "I didn't know how. They're my parents, and I hoped they'd change their minds. But when I saw them actually doing it tonight, when I saw you getting dizzy and confused," she wiped her eyes, "I couldn't let them hurt you." The taxi pulled up to the hospital, but I felt like I was drowning. 42 years I'd loved that boy. 42 years of birthday parties and Christmas mornings and proud moments. And he'd been willing to drug his own father to steal everything I'd worked for? "Change of destination," I told the driver.
Take us to my house on Maple Street." As we drove through the night, one thought echoed in my mind. If Michael was capable of this level of betrayal, what else had he done that I didn't know about? I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Michael's face as he tried to lead me upstairs, heard Emma's desperate whisper, felt the fog of whatever drug they'd slipped into my champagne. By dawn, I was sitting at my kitchen table with black coffee, trying to make sense of how my own son had become a stranger. The morning sun was just cresting the horizon when I decided to check my car. I needed to drive to the office, needed the familiar routine of work to clear my head. But as I walked down my driveway, something was wrong. My Honda Accord sat at an odd angle, listing to one side like a wounded animal. All 4 tires were completely flat. I knelt beside the front wheel, running my fingers along the rubber. This wasn't gradual deflation from age or weather. Each tire showed identical puncture marks near the sidewall, small, precise holes that could only have been made deliberately. Someone had driven nails into each tire with methodical precision. "Richard, is everything all right?" I looked up to see Dorothy Henderson, my neighbor of 15 years, standing at the edge of her property. She was still in her bathrobe, coffee mug in hand, concern written across her weathered face. "Someone vandalized my car," I said, standing up slowly. My knees protested, a reminder that 68 years had taken their toll. Dorothy's expression shifted, and she glanced around nervously before stepping closer. "Richard, I need to tell you something. I saw who did this." My blood went cold. "When?" "Tuesday night, after you and Michael had that argument. I was sitting on my porch. You know how I like the evening air. I saw Michael leave your house around 9:30, and he walked straight to your car." She paused, wrapping her robe tighter. "He had something in his hand. Looked like he was checking each tire. Then he knelt down by each one and did something. I thought it was strange, but I didn't want to interfere in family business." The argument she mentioned came flooding back. Just last Tuesday, Michael had stormed into my house demanding money for another investment opportunity, some cryptocurrency scheme that would revolutionize everything. When I'd refused, citing his track record of failures, he'd exploded. "You never believe in me," he'd shouted. "Every time I try to build something, you sabotage it with your negativity." I'd thought his anger was just wounded pride. I never imagined he'd retaliate by destroying my property. "Are you certain it was Michael?" I asked Dorothy. "Richard, I've known that boy since he was little. It was definitely him." She looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner. I kept hoping I was wrong." I called AAA and waited 2 hours for the tow truck. The mechanic, a young man named Jake who'd worked on my car before, whistled low when he saw the damage. "This is professional work," he said, examining the punctures. "Whoever did this knew exactly where to place the nails for maximum damage. You're looking at $800 for 4 new tires." $800! Michael had cost me $800 in petty revenge for refusing to fund another of his schemes. Back in my office, I spread out the financial records I'd been reviewing the day before. The Miami real estate disaster, $80,000. The cryptocurrency mining equipment that never existed, $55,000. The food truck partnership with a convicted embezzler, $35,000. Add in the smaller loans over the years, the gambling debts, the credit card payments, the emergency bailouts, and the total came to $170,000. $170,000 I'd given my son over 5 years, hoping each time that this would be the investment that turned his life around. Money that could have secured Emma's college education, funded my retirement, or expanded Thompson Construction. But it wasn't just the money. It was the pattern I was finally seeing clearly. The birthday party trap hadn't been a desperate, spur-of-the-moment decision. It was the culmination of years of escalating manipulation. First, he'd taken my money through emotional appeals and false promises. When that well ran dry, he'd moved to property damage and intimidation. And finally, he'd attempted outright theft through drugging and fraud. This wasn't the behavior of a troubled son making bad choices. This was the calculated strategy of a predator who happened to share my DNA. I leaned back in my chair and looked out at the construction site visible from my office window. 40 years I'd spent building Thompson Construction, earning the respect of this community, creating something lasting. And my own son had been planning to steal it all. That's when I made my decision. If Michael wanted to play hardball with a businessman who'd survived 4 decades in construction, I'd show him what 40 years of experience could do. You know what, Dad? Michael's voice seemed to come from far away, though he was standing right beside me. I want to show you something upstairs. Sarah and I renovated the guest room. It's got this amazing view of the garden. Through the growing fog in my brain, alarm bells began ringing. Michael wanted to get me alone, upstairs, while I was in this compromised state. Every instinct I developed in 40 years of business was screaming danger. When Michael offered his arm to help me up the stairs, I knew the trap was closing. Sitting in my office, surrounded by the evidence of Michael's betrayal, I felt something inside me break. Not just disappointment or anger, something deeper. The unconditional love I'd carried for my son for 42 years was dying, and I could feel it happening. I remembered teaching him to use tools when he was 8, his small hands wrapped around mine as we hammered nails into a birdhouse. "Measure twice, cut once, Dad," he'd repeated solemnly, proud to know a grown-up rule. Where had that eager little boy gone? When had he become someone who would drug his own father? But wallowing in memories wouldn't protect Thompson Construction or help me understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. I needed to think like the businessman I'd been for 4 decades, not the heartbroken father I was becoming. I opened my laptop and began a systematic review of every communication I'd had with Michael over the past year. Emails about family dinners, text messages about Emma's college progress, voicemails asking for advice, all of it took on a sinister new meaning when viewed through the lens of calculated manipulation. Then I found it. A forwarded email from Sarah's work account to Michael dated 6 months ago. The subject line read, "Elderly Client Asset Protection Strategies." My blood ran cold as I read Sarah's message. "This is how we help seniors protect their assets from scammers. Might be useful to understand the process from the other side." The attached document outlined exactly how elderly people could be manipulated into signing over their assets, the warning signs families should watch for, the legal protections available, the psychological tactics used by fraudsters. Sarah had essentially provided Michael with a blueprint for elder abuse, using her position at the bank to arm him with professional knowledge. I scrolled through more messages, finding a paper trail that made my stomach turn. Michael had researched my daily routines, my drinking habits, even my medication schedule. Sarah had provided information about my banking patterns and investment accounts, a clear violation of her professional ethics and probably several laws. One text message from Michael to Sarah sent 3 weeks ago made me physically ill. "Dad's getting more stubborn about money. Time to move to Plan B. You sure the birthday party idea will work?" Sarah's response, "Trust me, I've seen this approach work with other elderly clients. Once he's confused and disoriented, he'll sign anything we put in front of him. Just make sure Emma isn't around to interfere." They'd planned to exclude Emma because they knew she'd protect me. My granddaughter's desperate intervention last night hadn't been teenage drama. It had been the brave act of the only family member who still loved me unconditionally. I found Michael's research notes on my business, detailed financial projections for Thompson Construction, even preliminary discussions with potential buyers. He hadn't just planned to steal my company, he'd already been shopping it around to see what he could get for it. The final piece of evidence was a handwritten note in Michael's familiar scrawl, tucked into a folder labeled Dad's Retirement. Once we have control of Thompson Construction, we can liquidate everything and move to Florida. Dad will be too old and confused to fight it by then. Sarah says we can put him in a care facility if he becomes a problem. I stared at that note for a long time, feeling the last vestiges of fatherly love drain away like water from a broken pipe. They hadn't just planned to steal my business, they'd planned to warehouse me in a nursing home once I was no longer useful. 42 years of loving that boy, 42 years of believing in him, supporting him, making excuses for his failures. And he'd spent months planning to destroy me, reduce me to a confused old man locked away where I couldn't interfere with his new life. I closed the laptop and sat in the gathering darkness of my office. Outside, Springfield was settling into its evening routine. Families having dinner, children doing homework, normal people living normal lives. But my normal had been shattered by the realization that my own son saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to overcome. That was the moment I stopped being Michael's father and became his adversary.
If he wanted to treat this like a business transaction, I'd show him how business was really done. I spent that entire night in my home library, transforming it into a war room. The mahogany desk that had once held family photos and Christmas cards now served as command central, covered with legal pads, financial documents, and my laptop. If Michael wanted to play the game of business warfare, I'd analyze him the same way I'd analyze any competitor trying to destroy Thompson Construction. First, I mapped out Michael's network of victims. The man had been remarkably busy over the past 5 years. Using my business contacts and some careful internet research, I identified 12 separate individuals who'd lost money to Michael's various schemes. The Miami real estate fraud alone had taken down 6 investors for a combined $240,000. Add in the cryptocurrency victims, the food truck partners, and various smaller cons, and Michael had defrauded people out of approximately $340,000. What struck me wasn't just the amount, it was the pattern. Michael specifically targeted middle-class professionals who trusted him because of my reputation. He'd leveraged my 40 years of honest business dealings to gain credibility, then systematically robbed people who believed they were investing with Richard Thompson's son. I created detailed profiles of each victim. Marcus Rodriguez, a plumber who'd lost his retirement savings to the Miami scheme. Jennifer Walsh, a single mother who'd invested her daughter's college fund in Michael's cryptocurrency operation. David Chen, a restaurant owner who'd partnered with Michael on the food truck venture and lost his life savings when Michael's convicted felon partner disappeared with the equipment. These weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet, they were real people whose lives Michael had damaged while hiding behind my good name. Next, I analyzed Michael's social and professional network. Despite his failures, he'd maintained a surprising number of connections in Springfield's business community. He served on the Chamber of Commerce Young Professionals Board, attended networking events, and had even given a presentation at last year's Entrepreneur Breakfast. People still saw him as Richard Thompson's son, which opened doors that his own merit never could have. But reputation was a double-edged sword. The same connections that gave Michael credibility could turn against him if the right information reached the right people. I made notes about who influenced whom, which business leaders had the ear of the local media, and how information flowed through Springfield's tight-knit professional community. Sarah's position at First National Bank presented another vulnerability. I researched banking compliance regulations and discovered that her use of client information to assist Michael's schemes violated multiple federal laws. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency took ethics violations seriously, especially when they involved elder abuse. Sarah's banking license and her $65,000 annual salary could disappear with the right complaint to the right regulatory body. I also investigated their financial situation more thoroughly. Despite their expensive lifestyle, Michael and Sarah were drowning in debt. Credit cards maxed out, mortgage payments behind, car loans in default.
The birthday party expenses had probably been charged to already overextended credit lines. They were desperate, which explained the timing of their attack on me, but it also made them vulnerable. By 3 in the morning, I had a complete intelligence picture. Michael had created an extensive network of enemies who'd never had the opportunity to coordinate their response. He'd built his credibility on my reputation, making him vulnerable to attacks on that same reputation.
Sarah's professional position gave her access to information, but also subjected her to strict regulatory oversight. And their financial desperation meant they had few resources to fight back once I began my campaign. The most important insight came as dawn approached. Michael had succeeded so far because his victims had suffered in isolation. Marcus Rodriguez didn't know about Jennifer Walsh. David Chen had never spoken to the Miami investors. They'd all been embarrassed by their losses and ashamed of being fooled, so they'd kept quiet about Michael's fraud. But isolation was a two-way street. If Michael's victims had been too embarrassed to speak up, it meant Michael had no idea how many enemies he'd made or how angry they still were. He'd been operating under the assumption that his past victims would stay silent forever. That assumption was about to cost him everything. At 7 a.m. sharp, I made my first call. Marcus Rodriguez answered on the third ring, his voice thick with sleep and suspicion. "Marcus, this is Richard Thompson. I know it's early, but I need to talk to you about my son Michael." The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Finally, "Mr. Thompson, with all due respect, I don't want to talk about your son, ever." "Marcus, I understand your anger. Michael stole $25,000 from you with that Miami real estate scheme, but I need you to know he tried to steal my company from me too." Another pause. "What do you mean?" I told him about the birthday party trap, about finding the drugged champagne and the forged documents waiting upstairs, about Emma's desperate warning and Sarah's role in planning the whole thing. By the time I finished, Marcus's breathing had changed. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "His own father. I knew Michael was a con man, but I never thought. Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" "I'm fine, thanks to my granddaughter. But Marcus, I'm not calling for sympathy. I'm calling because I think it's time Michael faced consequences for what he's done to all of us." "All of us?" "You're not his only victim. I've identified 11 other people he's defrauded over the past 5 years. $340,000 in total losses." The anger in Marcus's voice was palpable. "That son of a bitch. I lost my retirement savings because I trusted him, because I trusted your name." "I know, and I take responsibility for that. My reputation gave him credibility he never earned." I paused, letting that sink in. "But now I want to use that same reputation to make sure he never hurts anyone else." "What do you have in mind?" "A coordinated response, legal action, regulatory complaints, public exposure. But I need allies, people who've been hurt by Michael and want to see justice done." "Count me in," Marcus said without hesitation. "What do you need?" The second call went to David Chen, the restaurant owner who'd lost his life savings in Michael's food truck scheme. David broke down crying when I explained what had happened. "Mr. Thompson, I'm so sorry. I should have warned you somehow. After Michael's partner disappeared with our equipment, I suspected Michael was involved, but I had no proof." "David, you have nothing to apologize for. You trusted my son because of my reputation, and he betrayed that trust. The question now is, do you want to help me make sure he can't do this to anyone else?" "That money was for my daughter's college tuition," David said, his voice breaking. "She's working 2 jobs now to pay for school because of what your son did to us." "Then help me make sure Michael pays for what he's done. To you, to your daughter, to all of us." "Yes," David said firmly, "whatever you need." My third call was to Jennifer Walsh, a financial advisor who'd lost money in Michael's cryptocurrency scheme. Her response was immediate and professional.
Mr. Thompson, I've been waiting for this call for 2 years.
I knew eventually Michael's chickens would come home to roost. You sound like you've given this some thought. I'm a financial crime specialist. What Michael did wasn't just theft. It was securities fraud, wire fraud, and elder abuse. I've been documenting everything, hoping someday I'd have the chance to see him prosecuted. Jennifer, I could use someone with your expertise. Would you be willing to help coordinate the legal aspects of this? It would be my pleasure. Michael Thompson has been running cons for years, hiding behind your good name. It's time someone held him accountable. By noon, I'd made 6 calls and recruited 5 allies. Only one person, a man who'd moved out of state and wanted to put the whole experience behind him, declined to participate. The others were eager, angry, and ready for action. Marcus Rodriguez brought connections in the local business community. David Chen had documentation of Michael's fraudulent food truck operation. Jennifer Walsh provided legal expertise and connections to regulatory agencies. 2 other victims, a retired teacher and a small business owner, offered additional testimony and evidence. But as I sat in my office, surrounded by notes and contact information, I realized that testimonies and documentation wouldn't be enough. If I wanted to destroy Michael completely, I needed irrefutable proof of his criminal intent. I needed evidence that would hold up in court and convince prosecutors to file charges. And I knew exactly where to find it. My first priority was building an airtight legal case. I called Robert Johnson, the attorney who'd handled Thompson Construction's contracts for 15 years. When I explained the situation, his response was immediate and decisive. "Richard, what Michael attempted is textbook elder abuse. Drugging someone to obtain signatures on legal documents is a felony in Missouri. We're talking about criminal charges, not just civil litigation." Johnson arrived at my office within an hour, bringing his paralegal and a digital recorder. We spent 3 hours documenting everything. Emma's testimony about the drugged champagne, the forged transfer documents Michael had prepared, Sarah's violation of banking ethics by providing my financial information. "The beauty of this case," Johnson explained, "is that Michael documented his own crimes. Those emails and text messages you found are smoking guns. Any prosecutor in the state would love to have evidence this clear-cut." My accountant, Patricia Williams, arrived as Johnson was leaving. Patricia had managed Thompson Construction's books for a decade, and her analysis of Michael's financial crimes was devastating. "Richard, what Sarah did at the bank isn't just unethical, it's illegal. She accessed confidential client information and shared it with a third party for fraudulent purposes. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency will revoke her license and probably refer the case for criminal prosecution." While we worked, my phone rang constantly. Michael's name appeared on the caller ID 8 times before noon. I let every call go to voicemail, and with each unanswered ring, I could imagine his anxiety growing. The first voicemail was casual. "Hey Dad, just checking in. Hope you're feeling better after last night. Call me back when you get a chance." By the third call, concern crept into his voice. "Dad, it's Michael again. I'm starting to worry. You always return my calls. Is everything okay?" The fifth message carried a sharp edge. "Dad, this is getting ridiculous. I know you're there. Sarah drove by your house and saw your car in the driveway. What's going on?" Patricia was still reviewing financial documents when I heard footsteps on the stairs leading to my office. Michael's voice echoed through the building. "Dad, I know you're up there."
"We need to talk." I motioned for Patricia to stay quiet and continued working. Michael pounded on the locked office door, his voice rising with each word. "Dad, open this door. I know you're in there. What the hell is wrong with you?" The pounding continued for several minutes before his footsteps retreated. Through my window, I watched him pace in the parking lot, cell phone pressed to his ear. Even from 3 floors up, I could see the agitation in his movements. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time it was Sarah. "Richard, Michael is beside himself. He thinks something happened to you last night. Can you please just call him back? He's driving me crazy with worry." I almost laughed at the irony. They were worried about me? After trying to drug and rob me? The eighth voicemail, left at 4:30 that afternoon, revealed just how desperate Michael had become. "Dad, I don't know what Emma told you, but whatever it was, she misunderstood the situation. We were just trying to help you with some paperwork. You seemed confused last night, and we thought, look, just call me back. We can work this out. We're family." But it was the ninth message, left at nearly midnight, that provided the final piece of evidence I needed. "Dad, I know you're planning something. Emma must have filled your head with lies about last night, but I'm warning you, don't make me do something we'll both regret. I've worked too hard to build my reputation in this town to let you destroy it with some senile old man's paranoid fantasies. Call me back, or you'll be sorry." I played that message 3 times, each word dripping with the arrogance and entitlement that had defined Michael's entire adult life. He'd tried to drug and rob his own father, and now he was threatening me for refusing to play along with his victim act. But Michael had made a crucial mistake.
In Missouri, threatening an elderly person constitutes criminal harassment, especially when combined with attempted financial exploitation. That voicemail wasn't just evidence of his character, it was another felony charge. I saved the message and added it to the growing file of evidence that would destroy my son's life. Michael thought he was pressuring me to back down, but he was actually providing prosecutors with everything they needed to put him in prison. Monday morning at 8 a.m. sharp, I sat in my office with fresh coffee and 40 years of accumulated business contacts. The time for planning was over. The time for execution had begun. My first email went to Tom Wilson, president of the Springfield Chamber of Commerce. The subject line was simple: urgent, Michael Thompson fraud alert, documented evidence attached. "Tom," I wrote, "I'm writing to inform you that my son Michael Thompson has been systematically defrauding local investors and using my reputation to gain credibility for his schemes. I've attached 47 pages of documented evidence, including emails, financial records, and victim testimonies. Michael recently attempted to drug and rob me of Thompson Construction at his birthday party. I believe the business community has a right to know who they're dealing with. Regards, Richard Thompson." The attached files contained everything: the Miami real estate fraud documentation, the cryptocurrency scam evidence, the food truck partnership records, and most damning of all, the emails and text messages showing Michael and Sarah's plan to drug me and steal my company. I sent similar emails to 217 business leaders, investors, and professional contacts throughout Springfield and the surrounding counties. Every Chamber of Commerce member, every Rotary Club president, every bank president, every real estate developer who'd worked with Thompson Construction over the decades. Michael had always bragged about his connections in the business community, how his networking was going to make him rich someday. He was about to discover that connections were a two-way street. My phone rang within 30 minutes. Tom Wilson's voice was tight with shock. "Richard, please tell me this isn't true. We had Michael speak at our entrepreneur breakfast just last month. He talked about innovative investment strategies and building wealth through partnerships." "Every word is documented, Tom. Michael has been running cons for 5 years, and he tried to steal my company last week by drugging me at his birthday party." "Jesus Christ. Richard, I'm so sorry. We've been promoting him as a rising young business leader. This is catastrophic for anyone who trusted our endorsement. That's why I wanted you to know immediately. How many people attended that breakfast?" 85 business owners and investors. Oh God, if any of them gave Michael money based on our platform. Wilson's voice trailed off as the implications hit him. By 9:30, my phone was ringing constantly. Business leaders calling to thank me for the warning, to share their own suspicions about Michael, to ask what they could do to help. The Springfield business community was small and tight-knit. When Richard Thompson said someone was a fraud, people listened. At 10 a.m., I could see Michael's world beginning to collapse in real time. Marcus Rodriguez called to report that Michael's phone was ringing non-stop. David Chen had driven by Michael's house and seen him pacing in his driveway, frantically taking call after call. "He looks like a man whose house is on fire," David said with satisfaction.
Jennifer Walsh called at 10:30. Richard, the SEC complaint has been filed. Sarah's bank has been notified of potential compliance violations.
The Missouri Division of Finance will open an investigation within 48 hours. At 11:15, Sarah called me, her voice breaking with panic and tears. "Richard, what are you doing? Michael's clients are all canceling their meetings. People are calling him a scammer. His phone hasn't stopped ringing with angry investors. Please, whatever Emma told you, we can work this out. Michael made mistakes, but destroying his reputation won't help anyone." "Sarah," I said calmly, "Michael made his choice when he decided to drug his own father. You made your choice when you helped him plan it. Now you're both living with the consequences." "But Emma's college fund." "Emma's college fund will be fine. I'm setting up a trust for her education that neither you nor Michael can touch. She's the only innocent person in this family." Sarah hung up without another word. At noon, I heard heavy footsteps on the stairs to my office. Michael burst through the door without knocking, his face pale and drawn, his usual confidence completely gone. "Dad, we need to talk. People are calling me a scammer. My business is falling apart. What the hell did you tell them?" I leaned back in my leather chair and smiled for the first time in a week. It felt good to see Michael finally understanding what real consequences looked like. "Son," I said quietly, "we have nothing to talk about. You tried to drug and rob your own father. But I have to admit, your problems are just getting started." The look of dawning horror on Michael's face was worth every sleepless night I'd spent planning his destruction. By Wednesday morning, Michael's destruction had moved beyond the business community into the realm of public humiliation. I was having breakfast when my neighbor Dorothy called, her voice barely containing her excitement. "Richard, have you seen the Springfield Gazette this morning?" I walked to my front porch and picked up the newspaper. There, splashed across the front page in bold headlines, "Local man attempts to defraud elderly father of $300,000 company." Below it was Michael's Chamber of Commerce photo, the same headshot he'd used when he spoke at their entrepreneur breakfast just weeks ago. The article was thorough and devastating. Reporter Janet Mills had interviewed 6 of Michael's victims, detailing each fraudulent scheme with precise dollar amounts and dates. The birthday party trap was described in clinical detail, including Emma's heroic intervention and the drugged champagne evidence. Thompson construction owner Richard Thompson, 68, discovered his son's elaborate plan to steal his $300,000 company when his granddaughter warned him he was being drugged at what he thought was a family birthday celebration, the article read. Police sources confirm that criminal charges are pending. My phone started ringing immediately. Friends, business associates, and complete strangers calling to express their shock and support. But more importantly, people were calling to share their own stories about Michael's attempts to defraud them. By noon, I decided to drive through town to gauge the community's reaction. What I found exceeded my expectations. At Murphy's Diner, where Michael used to hold his business meetings, the hostess recognized me immediately. "Mr. Thompson, I'm so sorry about what your son tried to do to you. We had no idea he was running scams out of our restaurant. He's banned from here permanently." At Henderson's Hardware, where Michael had purchased supplies for his various failed ventures, the owner pulled me aside. "Richard, I want you to know, if that boy shows his face in here again, I'm calling the police. What he did to you is unforgivable." The most telling moment came at Chen's Pharmacy, where Michael had filled prescriptions for his family for years. Mrs. Chen, normally the most diplomatic person in Springfield, didn't mince words. "Miss Thompson, I read the newspaper this morning. That boy is no longer welcome in my store. We don't serve people who steal from their parents." As I drove home, I passed Michael's house and saw him in his driveway, apparently trying to leave for some errand. But his car remained parked, and he stood beside it looking defeated. I later learned why.
He'd been refused service at 3 different businesses that day. The social isolation was complete. Springfield was a small town where reputation mattered, and Michael's reputation was now radioactive. Business owners didn't want him in their establishments. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid him. Former friends stopped returning his calls. That evening, Emma called me, her voice thick with tears. "Grandpa, I'm so embarrassed. Kids at college are sharing the newspaper article on social media. Everyone knows my dad tried to drug you and steal your company. I don't know how to face people." "Emma, sweetheart, you have nothing to be ashamed of. You saved me from your father's trap. You're the hero in this story." "But people are saying terrible things about our family. They're calling Dad a monster." "Emma, your father made his choices. The consequences are his to bear, not yours. You did the right thing, and I'm proud of you." After I hung up, I felt a pang of sympathy for my granddaughter, the only innocent victim in this entire mess. But Michael and Sarah had brought this on themselves and on her. Around 9 p.m., I noticed a car parked across the street from my house. In the dim streetlight, I could make out Michael's silhouette behind the wheel. He sat there for 3 hours, never getting out, never approaching the house, just sitting, staring, perhaps hoping I'd take pity on him and invite him in. I didn't. At midnight, he finally drove away, and I realized that seeing my own son reduced to a pariah sitting alone in his car made me feel something I hadn't expected: satisfaction. Justice wasn't just about legal consequences or financial ruin. It was about Michael finally understanding what it felt like to be completely alone, abandoned by everyone he'd counted on, with nowhere to turn and no one to trust. It was exactly what he'd planned for me. Thursday morning at 6 a.m., I stood at my bedroom window with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise paint Springfield's quiet streets in shades of gold and amber. Then I saw them. 2 police cruisers turning onto Michael's street, their red and blue lights flashing silently in the early morning light. I had been expecting this moment all week. Attorney Johnson had filed the criminal complaint Tuesday afternoon, and Detective Morrison had called Wednesday evening to confirm they had enough evidence to proceed with arrests. The moment I'd been waiting for had finally arrived. I watched from my window as the police cars pulled into Michael's driveway. Detective Morrison emerged from the lead vehicle, a tall, professional-looking man in his 50s whom I'd met briefly when giving my statement. 2 uniformed officers flanked him as they approached the front door. The knock was firm and official. Within minutes, Michael appeared in the doorway, still in his pajamas, his hair disheveled from sleep. Even from 3 blocks away, I could see his body language change as Detective Morrison showed his badge and began speaking. "Michael Thompson, you're under arrest for attempted theft, elder abuse, fraud, and document forgery." Morrison's voice carried clearly in the still morning air. Michael's response was immediate and desperate. "This is insane! This is my father! He's lying about everything! You can't believe a confused old man!" But Detective Morrison was reading from a prepared script, his voice professional and unwavering. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." That's when Michael made his biggest mistake. Instead of cooperating quietly, he began to resist, pulling away from the officer trying to handcuff him. "Get your hands off me! I haven't done anything wrong! My father is senile. He doesn't know what he's talking about." The struggle was brief but decisive. Within seconds, Michael was face down on his own driveway, hands cuffed behind his back, his voice muffled against the pavement as he continued to protest his innocence. Sarah burst through the front door in her bathrobe, her face a mask of panic and desperation. She ran toward the police cars, her voice breaking as she screamed across the neighborhood. "Richard! Richard, please! Think about Emma! She needs her father! Don't do this to your own family!"
I stepped back from my window, not wanting to be seen watching, but I could still hear every word echoing through the quiet suburban morning. By now, neighbors had begun emerging from their houses. Mrs. Patterson from next door to Michael stood on her front porch in her housecoat, arms crossed, watching the scene with obvious satisfaction. "About time someone stopped that boy," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "trying to steal from his own father. Disgraceful." Other neighbors had their phones out, recording the arrest. In a town like Springfield, this would be the talk of every coffee shop and beauty salon within hours. Michael's humiliation was now complete and public. As the officers lifted Michael to his feet and guided him toward the patrol car, he made one last desperate attempt to maintain his innocence. "Dad, I know you're watching. This is all a misunderstanding. We can work this out. Don't let them do this to your own son." But I remained hidden behind my curtains, watching as the man who had tried to drug and rob me was finally facing the consequences of his actions. Detective Morrison opened the back door of the patrol car, placed his hand on Michael's head to guide him inside, and closed the door with a solid thunk. Through the rear window, I could see Michael's face, pale, terrified, and finally understanding that his charmed life of manipulation and fraud was over. Sarah collapsed to her knees in the driveway as the police cars pulled away, her sobs echoing through the neighborhood. Several neighbors approached to offer comfort, but their sympathy was clearly limited. Everyone had read the newspaper. Everyone knew what she and Michael had tried to do. As the red and blue lights disappeared around the corner, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks: peace. 40 years of building Thompson Construction, 40 years of earning respect in this community, 40 years of honest work had finally been protected. The man who had planned to steal it all, who had researched how to warehouse me in a nursing home, who had threatened me when his plan failed, was now in the back of a police car, heading to the county jail. But seeing Michael in handcuffs was just the beginning. I wanted him to lose everything, just as he had planned for me to lose everything. And I was far from finished with my campaign of justice. With Michael sitting in the county jail awaiting arraignment, I drove to the courthouse Friday morning to officially reclaim what was rightfully mine. 40 years I'd spent building Thompson Construction from nothing, starting with a pickup truck and a toolbox, growing it into a $300,000 enterprise that employed 12 people and had built half the commercial buildings in Springfield. Now I had to fight in court to protect my life's work from my own son. Judge Martinez's courtroom was formal and intimidating, with dark wood paneling and the Missouri state seal hanging behind the bench. I sat beside Attorney Johnson, our briefcase full of evidence, while across the aisle, Michael's court-appointed lawyer shuffled through papers with the defeated air of someone who knew he was fighting an unwinnable case. "Your Honor," Johnson began, standing to address the court, "we're here to void fraudulent transfer documents that were obtained through coercion, elder abuse, and criminal deception." He methodically presented our evidence: the drugged champagne, the forged signatures, the premeditated nature of the birthday party trap, Emma's sworn affidavit describing how she'd saved me from Michael's scheme, the emails and text messages showing months of planning. Judge Martinez, a stern woman in her 60s, studied each document with the careful attention of someone who'd seen every type of fraud case imaginable. When Johnson finished his presentation, she looked up with obvious disgust. "Mr. Johnson, in 30 years on this bench, I've seen many cases of elder abuse, but this is particularly egregious. The defendant drugged his own father at a birthday party, a celebration that should represent family love and respect, in order to steal a company the victim spent 4 decades building." Michael's lawyer stood up weakly. "Your Honor, my client maintains his innocence of all charges. These transfer documents were signed voluntarily by Mr. Richard Thompson in a moment of family reconciliation." Judge Martinez's expression could have frozen water.
Counselor, are you seriously arguing that a man voluntarily signed over his life's work while under the influence of drugs administered without his knowledge by his own son? Your Honor, we dispute that any drugs were administered. The toxicology report from the hospital clearly shows sedatives in Mr. Thompson's system that night. The defendant's own text messages discuss drugging his father. What exactly are you disputing? The lawyer had no response. Without Michael present to coordinate the defense, and with the evidence overwhelmingly clear, there was nothing left to argue. The court finds that these transfer documents were obtained through fraud, coercion, and elder abuse, Judge Martinez declared.
All purported transfers of Thompson Construction assets to Michael Thompson are hereby declared null and void. Full ownership and control of Thompson Construction is restored to Richard Thompson, effective immediately. She signed the order with a flourish that felt like vindication. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the district attorney for additional criminal charges related to document forgery and attempted theft of assets exceeding $300,000. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt like David after defeating Goliath, except I'd had 40 years of business experience and better lawyers. The company I'd built with my own hands was officially mine again, protected by court order and backed by the full weight of Missouri law. But as I stood on the courthouse steps, breathing in the crisp October air and feeling the satisfaction of complete legal victory, I realized that getting my company back was just the first step. Michael was in jail, but eventually he'd be released. Eventually, he'd try to rebuild his life, probably by victimizing other elderly people who didn't have my resources or determination. I couldn't let that happen. Justice wasn't just about recovering what was stolen from me. It was about making sure Michael never had the opportunity to hurt anyone else again. The legal victory was complete, but my campaign wasn't finished. Getting my company back was satisfying, but it wasn't enough. Michael had defrauded 12 people out of $340,000 over 5 years, and those victims deserved more than just the satisfaction of seeing him arrested. They deserved to know that he would never be able to hurt anyone else again. The legal victory was complete, but my campaign wasn't finished. Getting my company back was satisfying, but it wasn't enough. Michael had defrauded 12 people out of $340,000 over 5 years, and those victims deserved more than just the satisfaction of seeing him arrested. They deserved to know that he would never be able to hurt anyone else again. I spent the weekend after the court victory working with my legal team and business network to create permanent barriers that would prevent Michael from ever rebuilding his criminal enterprise. First, I filed comprehensive complaints with every relevant regulatory agency. The Better Business Bureau received a detailed report documenting Michael's fraud pattern, complete with victim testimonies and financial records. The Missouri State Attorney General's office got copies of all evidence with a request for a full investigation into Michael's business practices. Most importantly, I contacted the IRS with evidence of Michael's tax evasion. Over 5 years, he'd collected $340,000 from victims, but had never reported any of it as income. The tax consequences alone would bankrupt him for decades. "Richard, this is brilliant," Jennifer Walsh said during our Monday morning strategy session. "Even if Michael somehow beats the criminal charges, the IRS will pursue him forever. They never give up, and they have powers that regular creditors don't." Next, I created what I called the Michael Thompson Fraud Alert Network throughout Springfield's business community. Every Chamber of Commerce member, every professional organization, every networking group received detailed warnings about Michael's methods and history. His photograph and criminal record would be circulated to anyone who might encounter him in a business context. "We need to make sure that Michael's name is radioactive in business circles," I explained to Marcus Rodriguez during one of our coordination meetings. "If he can't gain people's trust, he can't run cons." The most satisfying part was working with Michael's victims to file civil lawsuits for full restitution.
Even if the criminal case somehow failed, the civil suits would follow Michael for the rest of his life. We coordinated 12 separate lawsuits, totaling $340,000 in damages, plus interest and legal fees. The beauty of civil judgments, Attorney Johnson explained, is that they never go away. Michael will be paying these victims until the day he dies.
Every job he gets, every asset he acquires, every bank account he opens, it can all be garnished to pay these judgments. I also made sure Michael's name appeared in every fraud database and background check system available. The National Fraud Information Center, the Internet Crime Complaint Center, state consumer protection databases, everywhere a potential employer or business partner might look, they would find Michael Thompson's criminal history. By the end of the week, I had created a comprehensive web of legal, financial, and professional barriers that would follow Michael for the rest of his life. Attorney Johnson called me Friday afternoon with his assessment. "Richard, I've never seen such a thorough job of destroying someone's future prospects. With his criminal record, the civil judgments, the regulatory complaints, and the fraud alerts, Michael will never qualify for a business license, a bank loan, or any position of financial responsibility again." "What about when he gets out of jail? Could he start over somewhere else?" "Not a chance. These days, everything follows you. Background checks are computerized and permanent. Credit reports last forever. Even if Michael moved to another state, any legitimate employer would discover his history within hours." I felt a deep satisfaction hearing those words. Michael had planned to steal my company, warehouse me in a nursing home, and move to Florida to enjoy the proceeds of his theft. Instead, he would spend years in prison, followed by decades of financial servitude to his victims. "Perfect," I told Johnson. "That's exactly what someone deserves when they try to destroy their own father." Justice wasn't just about punishment, it was about protection. Michael would never again have the opportunity to drug an elderly parent or defraud trusting investors. The community was safe from him permanently. Even from his cell in the county jail, Michael couldn't accept that his manipulation tactics had finally failed. True to form, he began working every angle he could think of, using the two people he knew still cared about him, Emma and Sarah. The first attempt came through Sarah, who appeared at my door on a Tuesday evening looking haggard and desperate. She'd lost weight since her banking career imploded, and her clothes looked like she'd been wearing them for days. "Richard, please, I know you have every right to hate us, but Michael asked me to tell you something. He says he'll pay back everything, every penny he took from you and all the other victims, if you'll just drop the charges." I almost laughed at the audacity. "Sarah, Michael is unemployed and facing years in prison. You're unemployed and facing criminal charges yourself. What exactly are you going to pay me back with?" "We'll figure it out. We'll sell the house, liquidate everything. Michael just needs a chance to make this right." Michael had 42 years to make things right. Instead, he chose to drug and rob his own father. Some chances don't come twice. Sarah's composure cracked. "But what about Emma? She needs her father. You're destroying her family over money." "Emma's family was destroyed the moment her parents decided to commit elder abuse. I'm just making sure there are consequences." The second attempt came through Emma herself. My granddaughter called me Thursday evening, her voice thick with tears. "Grandpa, I talked to Dad today. He's so sorry about everything. He says you could stop this any time if you wanted to. Please, can't you find it in your heart to forgive him?" The pain in Emma's voice almost broke my resolve. She was 19 years old, caught between a grandfather she loved and a father she couldn't quite bring herself to abandon. "Emma, sweetheart, your father had a chance to be family when he decided to drug me and steal my company. Instead, he chose to be a criminal. I can't forgive someone who isn't truly sorry." "But he is sorry. He told me he realizes now how wrong he was." "Emma, If your father was truly sorry, he would have confessed to the police and pleaded guilty. Instead, he's trying to manipulate you into manipulating me. That's not remorse, that's just more of the same behavior. The final attempt came in the form of a handwritten letter that Sarah delivered on Friday. Michael's familiar scrawl covered 3 pages of jail stationery. "Dad, I know I made mistakes, but I'm still your son. Family should forgive each other, no matter what happens. I was desperate and scared about money, and I made terrible choices. But destroying my life won't undo what I did. Think about Emma. She needs her father. Think about the good times we had when I was growing up. That little boy who helped you build birdhouses is still inside me somewhere. Please don't let anger destroy our family forever. Love, Michael." Reading that letter, I felt a familiar tug of paternal emotion, the same feeling that had made me enable Michael's failures for years. But then I remembered his research notes about putting me in a nursing home, his casual dismissal of me as a confused old man, his threats when I wouldn't cooperate with his schemes. This letter wasn't an apology. It was another con job. Michael was using the same emotional manipulation tactics he'd always employed, trying to make me feel guilty for holding him accountable. He was playing the victim, invoking family loyalty, and appealing to my love for Emma, all while carefully avoiding any real admission of guilt or acceptance of responsibility. When Emma called again that evening, asking if I'd received her father's letter, I had to be honest with her. "Sweetheart, your father had every opportunity to be family when he tried to drug and rob me. He chose to be a criminal instead." These attempts to manipulate you into feeling sorry for him just prove that he hasn't learned anything from this experience. Michael's desperate manipulations from jail only confirmed what I'd already concluded. Some people never change, no matter how severe the consequences. 3 weeks after Michael's arrest, Sarah appeared at my door for what I sensed would be our final conversation. But this time was different. Gone was the desperate, manipulative woman who'd pleaded for her husband's freedom. The person standing on my porch looked broken, but there was something in her eyes I hadn't seen before: honesty. "Richard, I need to tell you the truth about everything. Not for Michael, not for me, but because Emma deserves to know what kind of people her parents really are." I invited her into my living room, the same space where I'd once welcomed her as a daughter-in-law, back when I believed she was a positive influence on Michael's life. The afternoon light streaming through my windows seemed to illuminate the exhaustion etched into her face. "I've been lying to myself for months," she began, her voice steady despite the tears forming in her eyes. "Michael didn't plan the birthday party trap in a moment of desperation. He'd been planning it for 8 months, Richard. He studied your habits, your drinking patterns, your trust in family. He researched elder abuse techniques like it was a business project." The methodical nature of Michael's betrayal still stung, but I needed to hear everything. "He said you were just an old man with too much money and not enough sense," Sarah continued, her voice breaking slightly. "He talked about you like you were a mark, not his father. And I helped him because I thought you owed us something after all his business failures." I watched Sarah's face as she spoke, looking for signs of the manipulation I'd grown accustomed to from this family. But what I saw was different. Genuine shame, real understanding of the magnitude of what they'd done. "I used my position at the bank to help him understand your financial situation. I violated every professional oath I'd ever taken because I convinced myself that you had so much money, losing some of it wouldn't really hurt you." She looked directly at me. "I was wrong about everything." "What changed your mind?" "Visiting Michael in jail. He still doesn't think he did anything wrong, Richard. He's angry at you for overreacting. He's angry at Emma for interfering. He's angry at me for not being supportive enough. He takes no responsibility for any of it." Sarah stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the street where she'd once felt welcome. "I see now that Michael is sick. Not mentally ill, but morally sick.
He can't stop lying and stealing and manipulating people. And I enabled him for years because I thought that's what a supportive wife was supposed to do. Sarah, why are you telling me this now? She turned back to face me, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw complete honesty in her expression. Because Emma called me yesterday. She's thinking about dropping out of college because she's so ashamed of what we did to you. She feels responsible for our crimes because she couldn't stop us. Sarah's voice broke completely. Richard, what can I do to make this right? I know I can't undo the damage we caused, but Emma shouldn't suffer for our mistakes. I studied Sarah's face for a long moment. After weeks of manipulation attempts and desperate excuses, this felt different. This felt like genuine remorse from someone who finally understood the full scope of what they'd done. Sarah, I can't forgive you overnight. What you and Michael did was unforgivable. But I can see that you understand that now, which is more than I can say for your husband. I'm going to testify against Michael at his trial, she said quietly. I'm going to tell them everything. The planning, the research, my role in it all. He deserves to go to prison for what he did to you. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, one member of Michael's family could be saved from the wreckage of their choices. Sentencing day arrived on a cold December morning, exactly 2 months after the birthday party that had changed everything. I sat in the packed courtroom, wearing my best suit, ready to watch Michael finally face the full consequences of his betrayal. The journey from that drugged champagne to this moment felt both eternal and impossibly swift. 2 months ago, I'd been a trusting father who still believed in his son's potential for redemption. Now, I was a man who'd systematically destroyed that same son's life in pursuit of justice. Judge Martinez entered the courtroom with the same stern dignity she'd shown throughout the trial. The gallery was full: victims, reporters, curious townspeople who'd followed the case in the Springfield Gazette. Emma sat in the front row, pale but resolute, having chosen to witness her father's final reckoning. Michael was led in wearing an Orange County Jail uniform, his hands shackled, his face gaunt from 2 months of incarceration. The confident businessman who'd once bragged about his connections was gone, replaced by a broken man who finally understood that actions have consequences. The defendant will rise, Judge Martinez commanded. Michael stood unsteadily, supported by his court-appointed attorney. The prosecutor, District Attorney Rebecca Chen, rose to read the charges one final time. Your Honor, the defendant has been found guilty on all counts: attempted theft of assets exceeding $300,000, elder abuse in the first degree, fraud, document forgery, and criminal harassment of an elderly person. Each charge hit like a hammer blow. Michael's shoulders sagged further with every word. Your Honor, Michael's lawyer began weakly, my client wishes to address the court before sentencing. Judge Martinez nodded curtly. The defendant may speak. Michael turned toward me, his eyes red with tears I'd never seen him shed before. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Your Honor, I know I made terrible mistakes. I was desperate about money, and I made choices that hurt the person who loved me most. I never meant to hurt my father. I just wanted to succeed at something for once in my life. Judge Martinez's expression could have frozen steel. Mr. Thompson, you didn't make mistakes. You made calculated decisions over a period of 8 months. You researched elder abuse techniques. You studied your father's habits and vulnerabilities. You enlisted your wife to violate banking regulations. You drugged your elderly father at what should have been a celebration of family love. Michael's lawyer tried to interject, but Judge Martinez continued relentlessly. This court has reviewed extensive evidence of your fraud pattern spanning 5 years. You've defrauded 12 victims out of $340,000, using your father's reputation to gain their trust. You planned to steal his life's work, then warehouse him in a nursing home when he became inconvenient. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing. Mr. Thompson, you represent the worst kind of family betrayal. You exploited the natural trust between parent and child to commit crimes that strike at the very foundation of our society's values. Judge Martinez opened the sentencing folder with deliberate ceremony. On the charge of attempted theft exceeding $300,000, I sentence you to 8 years in the Missouri Department of Corrections. On the charge of elder abuse in the first degree, I sentence you to 4 years, to run consecutively. On the charges of fraud and document forgery, I sentence you to 2 years each, to run concurrently. The math was devastating. 12 years in prison. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution to all victims totaling $340,000, plus interest and court costs. You will be permanently barred from any position involving financial responsibility or access to elderly clients. Your name will remain on the state fraud database permanently. As the bailiff moved to escort Michael away, he turned toward me one final time. Our eyes met across the courtroom, and for just a moment I saw the little boy who'd once helped me build birdhouses. "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry." But it was too late. 42 years too late. I watched as my son was led away in chains, his orange uniform a stark reminder of how far he'd fallen. Emma was crying silently beside me, grieving for the father she'd lost to his own choices. Justice was complete. Michael would spend the next 12 years in prison, followed by decades of financial servitude to his victims. He would never again have the opportunity to hurt elderly people or defraud trusting investors. But as I walked out of that courtroom, I felt strangely empty. Victory, yes, complete and total victory. But at what cost? I'd destroyed my own son to protect myself and others from his predatory behavior. Sometimes justice feels less like triumph and more like necessary surgery. Painful, but essential for survival. 6 months after Michael's sentencing, I stood in my renovated Thompson construction office, finally able to focus on the future instead of the past. The company that had nearly been stolen from me was not only surviving, it was thriving in ways I'd never imagined possible. The renovation had been both practical and symbolic. New carpet, fresh paint, updated technology, and a wall of awards and certifications that told the story of 4 decades of honest work.
But the most significant change was psychological. I could finally work without constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering what scheme Michael might be plotting next. My assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Thompson, Mayor Davidson is here about the Civic Center contract." The Civic Center project was Thompson Construction's largest contract in company history, $2.3 million to build Springfield's new community center. When the mayor had announced we'd won the bid, he'd made a point of praising our uncompromising integrity and commitment to honest business practices. The community's respect for me had actually increased after I'd stood up to family fraud. "Richard," Mayor Davidson said as he entered my office, "I wanted to personally thank you again for taking on this project. After everything you've been through this year, it means a lot that you're still committed to building Springfield's future. Mayor, this community supported me when I needed it most. This project is my way of giving back." As we discussed construction timelines, I heard familiar laughter in the hallway. Emma was spending her summer break interning at Thompson Construction, learning the business the right way, from the ground up with honesty and hard work. "Grandpa, the Johnson project is ahead of schedule," she reported when the mayor left. "The crew says you trained them well." Watching Emma work filled me with pride I hadn't felt in years. At 19, she already understood that success came from dedication and integrity, not shortcuts and scams. She was everything I'd hoped Michael would become. "Emma, how do you feel about possibly taking over this company someday?"
Her eyes lit up. Really? You'd trust me with Thompson Construction? Sweetheart, you're the only person I trust completely. You saved me when your own parents tried to destroy me.
This company needs someone with your character. Later that afternoon, Sarah stopped by to drop off some of Emma's college paperwork. The transformation in my former daughter-in-law was remarkable. She'd found work at a small credit union, starting over in entry-level positions, slowly rebuilding her career through honest work. Richard, I wanted you to know, I got my first promotion, assistant loan officer. It's not much, but it's a start. Sarah, I'm proud of you for choosing the hard path instead of the easy one. I learned from the best, she said quietly. You could have destroyed me completely, but you gave me a chance to make things right. As evening approached, I walked through the construction yard, checking on projects and talking with workers who'd been with me for years. These men respected the Thompson name because it meant quality, reliability, and fair treatment. That reputation had taken decades to build, and I'd nearly lost it all because of my son's crimes. But protecting Thompson Construction hadn't just been about money or business success. It had been about preserving something meaningful for Emma, a legacy built on honest work, community respect, and the understanding that success earned through integrity was the only success worth having. Standing in my office as the sun set over Springfield, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in years. The company was secure, Emma's future was bright, and justice had been served. Yet, late at night, in the quiet moments before sleep, I sometimes found myself wondering, could I have saved Michael if I'd been stricter when he was younger? If I'd refused to enable his failures earlier? If I'd recognized his manipulative nature sooner? The questions haunted me, but I knew the answer didn't matter anymore. Some people choose their path despite every opportunity to choose differently. Today, as I prepare to hand Thompson Construction to Emma, I reflect on the painful lessons about family, trust, and the necessity of protecting what you've built. 2 years have passed since that birthday party that changed everything, and I can finally see the full arc of this journey from near destruction to renewal. The company celebration was held in our newly expanded conference room, filled with employees, community leaders, and friends who'd supported me through the darkest period of my life. Emma, now 21 and a college graduate with a business degree, stood beside me as I announced her promotion to junior partner. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, looking out at the faces that represented 40 years of honest relationships. Thompson Construction has always been about more than building structures. We build trust, we build community, and we build legacies that last. Today, I'm proud to announce that legacy will continue with Emma Thompson as our new junior partner. The applause was warm and genuine. Emma had earned this position through 2 years of working every job in the company, from carrying tools to managing client relationships. She understood that respect was earned, not inherited. "Grandpa," Emma said when it was her turn to speak, "you taught me that success without integrity is just elaborate failure. I promise I'll never let anyone destroy what you built. I understand now what family honor really means." After the celebration, Emma and I sat in my office to finalize the succession plan I'd been developing. The Thompson Family Trust would protect company assets from any future fraud attempts with ironclad legal provisions that prevented anyone, family or otherwise, from manipulating elderly trustees. "These protections seem extreme," Emma observed, reviewing the documents. "Emma, I learned that trusting family unconditionally can be dangerous. Love doesn't always mean loyalty, and blood doesn't guarantee character. These safeguards will protect you and future generations from what I experienced. I also established the Richard Thompson Business Ethics Scholarship at Springfield Community College, funding education for students who demonstrated both financial need and moral character. The scholarship required recipients to study a case study I'd written about Michael's fraud, a detailed memoir that would serve as a warning to other families. "Why did you decide to publish the whole story?" Emma asked. "Because silence protects predators.
Other elderly parents need to understand the warning signs of financial abuse, even when it comes from their own children. If my experience can save one family from what we went through, it's worth the embarrassment. Sarah attended the celebration, sitting quietly in the back but offering genuine congratulations afterward. She'd rebuilt her life through honest work and was now a branch manager at the credit union, respected for her integrity and her commitment to protecting elderly clients from financial abuse. "Richard, thank you for giving me a chance to prove I could change," she said as the event wound down. "Sarah, you chose to change. I just chose not to destroy you completely. There's a difference." As the sun set over Springfield, I walked through the construction yard one last time as the sole owner of Thompson Construction. Tomorrow, Emma would begin her journey as my partner and eventual successor. The company that Michael had tried to steal was now secure in the hands of someone who truly understood its values. Michael still had 8 years remaining on his prison sentence. I'd heard from his lawyer that he'd become a model prisoner, teaching literacy classes and supposedly finding religion. Perhaps he'd finally learned something about consequences and responsibility. Perhaps not. Either way, he'd never again have the opportunity to hurt the people who trusted him.
Standing in my office, looking at the framed photo of Emma's graduation, I realized that sometimes protecting your family means protecting them from each other. It's painful, but it's necessary. The Thompson legacy would continue, built on honesty, protected by wisdom, and guided by the understanding that true success comes not from what you can take, but from what you can build and preserve for those who come after you. Justice isn't always swift, but when it comes, it's complete. Michael learned that betraying the people who love you most doesn't just destroy relationships, it destroys your entire future. The hardest lesson I learned was that protecting what you've built sometimes means protecting it from your own family. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, and love doesn't excuse criminal behavior. When someone shows you who they really are through their actions, believe them the first time. Today, Thompson Construction thrives under Emma's leadership, built on the foundation that integrity isn't negotiable, and trust, once broken, can never be fully repaired. Sometimes the greatest act of love is holding people accountable for their choices, no matter how much it hurts. If you've experienced betrayal from someone you trusted completely, share your story in the comments below. You're not alone, and your experience might help others recognize the warning signs. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about justice, family, and the consequences of our choices. Thank you for listening.